I'm sure that most people haven't a clue that once upon a time this happened.
Well, the majority of the people didn't want Prohibition to be enacted in the Crowsnest Pass. These rum runners had that quasi-Robin Hood feel to them.
People who have written about Prohibition in Alberta write about Picariello as the Al Capone of the past. Picariello had a target on his back. The trap was ready to be sprung.
It's often easy to look at Fernie and Crowsnest Pass as sleepy little mining towns. The Crowsnest Pass was the center of coal mining in Canada. In fact, the population of Fernie exceeded that of Calgary at that time. The miners on payday all went to the bars, and it was a way of life almost. The stores here in Fernie and the stores in Crowsnest Pass all had credit systems because most of the miners would spend most of their paycheck in the bar.
There's a tie between the social gospel, women's suffrage, organized labor, and the temperance movement. These were all movements that sought to make society better, and they all saw liquor as being detrimental towards that. So they sort of coalesced as a force surrounding Prohibition.
There's also the argument made that if our boys are over there fighting in the trenches, the least we can do here is support them by not consuming alcohol, because that money could be going to the war effort.
Prohibition had been passed as law in 1916.
It didn't last long here in BC. In fact, in BC, it had a very short shelf life and really kind of set the stage for the next stage of kind of rum running. The United States was dry, Alberta was dry, but BC, that was wet. And you had 11 liquor warehouses here in Fernie, and that set the stage for a whole new industry once Prohibition was lifted here in British Columbia.
When you think about a community like the Crowsnest Pass, which is full of immigrants who drink wine with their meals, this notion that a relatively civilized drink was not allowed is almost crazy to someone who comes from a different culture.
And most of the people that drank alcohol in the Crowsnest were miners. So to say to those guys that after my 10-hour shift, I can't come out and have a beer in the bar with my buddies, I mean, I think even if you told somebody that today, they just say, no, we can't do that.
At one point, the Attorney General claimed that 60% of adult males in Alberta were in violation of the Liquor Act. So it was clearly not a popular act. It was a very difficult act to enforce.
If they ban something completely, there's going to be somebody that's going to find out a way to make money off it, especially if it's in demand. There was such a demand that they could see the opportunity.
We had three kingpins that kind of worked in southern Alberta and Fernie, and that was Mark Rogers, Jack Wilson, and Emilio Picariello.
Emilio Picariello came from Italy and started out in eastern Canada as a businessman and then came out west.
He had an ice cream wagon, he had a grocery store, he had a hotel, he had a bar, he had a coffee shop, and of course his initial investment in bottles so that when Prohibition came, he had the market on bottles and could bottle his illegal brew is what got him the nickname Emperor Pic, the Bottle King.
To his credit, I mean, he was well organized and knew what to do, and but he had an attitude that nobody should stop him. You know, that he was above the law.
The Alberta Provincial Police were brought in during the First World War, and it was a measure to enforce Prohibition, but they took on all policing duties.
To have your own police force as a province, really, it's kind of growing up as a province and coming into your own.
I think they were put in place also in order to give returning vets from the First World War a kind of occupation.
One has to have an understanding of the makeup of the police force itself. It was their vision of society that was going to prevail. It was their values, which were Anglo values.
One of the things that they did, probably one of the most significant, was to establish a separate liquor squad.
They checked shipments by the CPR. They had blockades at the border and checked cars. They cracked down on private stills too. If they found that somebody was making liquor, they would go and have a talk with them.
Constable Stephen Oldacres Lawson, he was a police officer with the Alberta Provincial Police. He had come to the force from Fernie, British Columbia, where he had been the chief of police.
And they hadn't had much success in policing the Prohibition at all in Alberta. And they wanted to make a case that this was successful.
The arrests escalated, not only of hotels, serving beyond the legal time limit and all of these things. But also you can see that he begins to target Italians.
Emilio Picariello and Constable Lawson would have run into each other quite a bit, and Lawson was always trying to catch him with liquor, and Picariello was always trying to evade capture.
The Alberta Hotel in Blairmore, that was Emperor Pic's headquarters. He dug a tunnel to the basement of the hotel, and he could unload his liquor, and nobody would see him going into the hotel with these cases of liquor.
The professional bootleggers would have 2 or 3 vehicles, and they would be packed with booze.
The most popular running route here was to go through Phillips Pass. And yeah, there are all kinds of passes between Alberta and BC, and the police weren't watching them, so you could really go anywhere.
The classic example of a car is a McLaughlin Buick, a Whiskey 6, as it was nicknamed. It could outrun most anything the APP or Northwest Mounted Police had in their arsenal of vehicles, other than the few Indian motorcycles the APP had.
They were apparently incredible, both for their power, because they had huge engines, and because they could kind of go through roadblocks, although the story is that they filled the bumpers with cement, and they could carry a lot.
On the 21st of September 1922, Constable Stephen Lawson was pursuing a bootlegger who turned out to be the son of Emilio Picariello.
All of the Alberta Provincial Police and the local police in those communities were aware that this liquor run was happening. The trap was ready to be sprung. Lawson set up a roadblock and waved to stop. He didn't. There's one road, right? And so Lawson shot at him. He shot him in the hand. He makes his escape into BC, stops in Natal, where he asks a BC provincial policeman where he could find a telephone so that he could speak to his father. Picariello then knew that his son had not been wounded seriously.
So Picariello went to Coleman, to the APP barracks, to find out what was going on, and he took Florence Lissandro with him.
Florence was a friend of the family of the Picariello family. Why would your housekeeper and family friend come running to Coleman when you hear of your boss's son is incarcerated? It adds speculation to her character and the family relationship there.
So they each took guns, which turned out to be a really bad idea.
Lawson then off duty with his family in the house. Picariello was angry. He wanted his son released. Constable Lawson disagreed. Florence was also chiming in. The discussion became heated, escalated, and eventually shots were fired as Constable Lawson was walking back to his house. Florence was captured first, and then there was a manhunt for Picariello after that. You had a police officer killed. That's a major offense, no matter what side of the law you're on.
Lissandro confessed, getting the confession from her. He didn't want a confession from her. He wanted a confession from Picariello. But she confessed.
They both fired weapons, turns out, but nobody can tell for sure which. They didn't have ballistics in those days, right? So even though they recovered the bullet and gave it for evidence, they didn't have the ballistic, to say conclusively that it came from that pistol or that pistol.
We only have Pearlie's evidence, the 9-year-old daughter of Constable Lawson, who was playing behind the vehicle and talked about they're hugging Mr. Pick.
There are theories that Lawson was not shot by Picariello at all, but that there was another shooter standing in the alley behind because he shot from a very odd angle.
There is a postcard that is badly written in pencil, which says, "I was the shooter in the alley." Now, I could be, there are all sorts of cranks who emerge and, get themselves involved, but it is there.
It was very clear that the public thought that these Italian immigrants had run amok, had murdered a good citizen, and that they deserved the full force of the law.
On May 2nd, 1923, at Fort Saskatchewan Penitentiary, Emilio Picariello and Florence Lysander were hanged.
The case really highlighted the fact that Prohibition wasn't working. This was how you're going to police it, that policemen are going to end up dead. The trial was meant to put Prohibition into the court of public opinion, and it lost all across the board.
Once Prohibition was repealed in 1924 and different liquor laws were put in place, public opinion changed quite dramatically, but the Alberta Provincial Police Force lasted for 15 years. It brings to light that the mounted police aren't the ones that have always enforced laws in this land. There's been other agencies. So I think it's important in terms of the public knowing that. I think one of the biggest challenges of people connecting with their past and understanding their past is the perception that they view Canadian history as boring. There's a sense that we don't have really interesting characters or stories. We do. There's hundreds of them.
I think people in the Crowsnest Pass have taken that history, they've kept it alive in stories, in oral histories. It ties yourself to this place, kind of makes it fun and exciting and a story to tell.